Good afternoon. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of January 22nd, 2025. My name is Tim Rainey, and I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Jeffrey Penzis serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Penzis, may I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Bruce.
Present.
Mr. Campbell.
Present.
Mr. Claybrook.
Here.
Ms. Conrad.
Here.
Mr. Love.
Present.
And Chair Rainey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff. You may remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, thank you. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting?
So moved. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Secretary, please provide us a secretary's report, if there is one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As for a secretary's report, there are no announcements this afternoon. The procedure for this meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda can be found at the front podium. For each case, the planner with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the applicant will have 5 minutes to present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, those speakers in support will have a total of 5 minutes, then those speakers in opposition will have a total of 10 minutes, and then finally the applicant will have 2 minutes to provide rebuttal. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chairman may provide additional time provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chairman. If a member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support of or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out a speaker's card for the record. Speaker's cards are available at the front podium. Once filled out, speaker's cards can be submitted to any DPD staff member at the left podium. We do not need speaker's cards from the applicants since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. If the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing pursuant to the board's rules of procedure. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and/or rebuttal. All motions by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 3 months with the consent of the applicant or 1 month without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st, 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish a consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to the case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should do so by a show of hands when the secretary reads the case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the consent agenda as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on those cases. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible to be placed on consent today?
First, I would like to just note that item number 1 has been withdrawn. Item number 2, BOA 2024-108 at 6621 East Kerrville Rosemark Road as a hold for 1 month. Item number 3, BOA 2024-111 at 289 Woodmont Drive as a hold for 1 month. Item number 4, BOA 2024-116 at 22 North BB King as approval with conditions. Item number 5, BOA 2024-117 at 414 East Micklemore Avenue as a hold for 1 month. Item number 6, BOA 2024-115 at 580 McKinley Street as approval with conditions. Item number 7, BOA 2024-121 at 2701 Union Avenue Extended as approval with conditions. Item number 10, BOA 2024-129 at 3631 Charleswood Avenue as approval with conditions. Item number 11, BOA 2024-131 at 3929 Summer Avenue as a hold for 1 month. And item number 12, BOA 2024-132 at 816 North Willette Street as a hold for 1 month.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as established by the Secretary, which would be items 2 and 3 as a hold, 4 approval with conditions, 5 as a hold, 6, 7, 10 approval with conditions, and 11, 12 as holds.
So moved.
Second. I'd be moving second. I remind the board that by voting on the consent agenda, he or she affirms that he or she has read the staff report and is in full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad, Mr. Love,
Yes.
Ms. Gerlach,
Oh. Yes.
and Chair Rainey.
I'm going to vote yes, but I would want to do everything but number 7, and I'm just going to recuse myself. I recuse myself in the original case.
So noted.
All right. All right, so the consent agenda is approved. I guess we are ready to hear our first. So if you were here for those cases, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12, you've been either approved or held as requested. So we're going to hear, we have 2 cases to hear today. And if Mr. Penzis, you'll call that first case.
Item number 8, BOA 2024 at 122, sorry, BOA 2024-122 at 1109, 1111, 11, oh, so many 11s. All on Walker Avenue. There's 4 different addresses.
Okay, is the applicant present on agenda 8? Okay, you'll come down to the front row, please. And is there any opposition today? I don't see any. Okay. All right. If Ms. Longstreet, could you give us a staff report, please?
Yes.
And sir, you can have a seat if you'd like.
Oh.
So yeah, we'll get to you in just a second, but she's going to give us a brief staff report.
Alexis Longstreet with the DPD, presenting on BOA 2024-0122. This property is for 4 lots located on Walker Avenue with the corresponding case of BOA 2023-034, which permitted development on the lots that was less than the required square footage within the zoning district. This property is located in South Memphis area. 185 notices were mailed out on January 2nd. The property is zoned R6, and so that BOA case that is relevant from 2023 was to allow the development on lots that was less than 6,000 square feet, which is the required minimum within that zoning district. It is encompassed by single-family and vacant lot land use designations as well. These properties were vacant up until, I believe, August of 2023, in which at that point the foundations had been laid for all 4 lots. And the elevations for all of the homes that were constructed can be found on pages 16 to 19. They are all very similar. I did include just a simple site plan to show 1109 Walker Avenue. and as well as 1111, 1113, and 1115 Walker Avenue. The only difference mainly between the two is that there is rear driveway alley access for 1111, 1113, and 1115, whereas you can see here on 1109, it seems to be that the drive is still located in the front of the parcel. We did look at the previous BOA case, and there was no language that immediately addressed the drive access for 1109 or the other four parcels. So as mentioned earlier, it was August 2024, excuse me, I put that on record, that it was August 2024 up until when these properties were no longer vacant and had poured foundations. As condition number 2 of the original BOA case was that they all had a 18 minimum foundation. And the applicant did address the fact in which that they did miss that condition, so therefore the foundations that were laid are not that of the required 18 inches. And that concludes my presentation.
All right. If the applicant come forward, please. If you'll give your name and address for the record for us.
Frankie Anderson, 3212 Jean Drive, Memphis, Tennessee, 38118.
Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you
Yes.
God? Okay, tell us about what happened.
These plans were actually submitted in early part of 2022, and I submitted all 4 of them at the same time. 1 out of the 4 were originally approved, and the other 3 were rejected. So I'm like, okay, all 4 of them were the same plan. So I came down, got a variance. Thank the Lord I didn't start building on that 1. So I came down and got a variance and approval to do the 25. So we submitted those, got them approved. But during that time, it took several months, and I went through several different reps at code enforcement. It's no excuse at all of mine, but it took 2 years to get approved. And during those 2 years, my 2 project managers passed away. They were handling the project. One was my father, and one was another project manager. So when I finally got the approval in the early part of 2024, I just picked up the plans, went ahead and poured the foundations because we had some good weather, and didn't pay attention to the note of the 18 inches. So I do take full responsibility of that. And we have 2 of the houses, it's stated already framed, past the electrical rough end, plumbing, heating there. And that's when I was trying to get my framing inspection when it was brought about the 18 inches.
Okay. Have you looked at the conditions that the staff gave for how to kind of move forward with it, with like the 18-inch wall and stuff like that, to kind of give the perception of it being a higher house?
Yes, sir. I did submit those plans. I suggested landscaping around the front exterior elevation.
Yes, I would like to know, it is in the staff report that the applicant proposed that in the site plan. We just reiterated in the conditions to be sure that that would be
Gotcha.
how
Okay.
it would be developed.
All right. Does the board have any questions for the applicant? Okay. We've had some issues lately, especially in a couple of historic neighborhoods and stuff, with people coming in and not doing the right height. So I'm going to tell you what I told them, or what the board told them, not me.
Yes.
Don't do it again.
Okay. No, I truly understand. Yeah.
And I get what happens. Sometimes you just miss something and stuff like that. But forgiveness only comes once.
Exactly. No, I understand. I do.
Right.
I do. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Any other comments before we vote?
So we're voting on the conditions that if we were to approve it, those conditions would all be
Correct.
adhered to all of them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, if we get a roll call vote, please.
We need a motion.
Oh, we need a motion, sorry. If we could get a motion to approve BOA 2024-122 as conditioned by staff.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, I guess I'll now ask again, any discussion before we vote? Sorry about that, it's been first one of the year. All right, Mr. Penzis, if you could give us a roll call, please.
Ms. Gerlach.
Yes.
Mr. Love.
Sorry. Yes.
Ms. Conrad.
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Bruce,
Yes.
and Chair Rainey.
Yes, I find the standards of 9.22.6 are being held up and that it's not be injurious to the neighborhood.
Motion carries.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. You've been approved with those conditions.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, Mr. Pensis, you call our next case for us?
Item number 9, BOA 2024-123 at 5167 Poplar Avenue.
All right, I see the applicants here. Is there any opposition today? Okay. All right, y'all can have a seat and we'll hear a staff report, please.
Good afternoon, Nicholas Ward, Division of Planning and Development. This is a request at 5167 Poplar to establish a drive-through restaurant on a site that has both an existing drive-through structure and a non-conforming billboard. So a little background here, this is a site that has an existing drive-through structure that was formerly a smoke shop and a dry cleaner. However, drive-through use is not permitted in CMU 1, so the first variance they need is a use variance. They also need a variance from a provision in the UDC that says if you have a non-conforming sign, in this case a billboard, the principal use cannot change without that non-conforming sign coming into compliance, which in this case would require removing it. So those are the two variances they need. So I'll go through the use variance question quickly because staff didn't really have a lot of concerns with that. So you can see, here's an aerial of the site here. We're on Poplar Avenue. And this pink at the rear is in the railroad right-of-way. So as I stated, drive-through restaurants became non-permitted uses in CMU 1 about 2 years ago now, requiring use variance. However, we agree with the applicant that CMU 1 permitted uses are likely impractical on this site due to the very small buildable area due to the railroad right-of-way and the existence of the drive-through structure. And so we're recommending approval with conditions on the drive-through use. The more interesting question is, and here's their site plan. Happy to answer any questions on that. The more interesting question is about this billboard on the property. So there is a non-conforming billboard on the property, as you can see in this photo, which this body allowed to be digitized in 2014. However, in doing so, the board imposed a condition stipulating that it remained non-conforming, right? And that is condition 1 you see here. And so the UDC in the sign code, chapter 4.9, stipulates that a change in principal use on a site requires that signs come into conformance. So that's the language here from which they'll need a variance in order to establish the restaurant use. Additionally, I do want to mention that in 2023, this body granted a variance to allow a smoke shop without enforcing this provision, and that's something we'll own up to as a oversight on our part. This issue should have come up then, but it didn't. As you know, in granting a variance, this board is required to find that granting that variance is, quote, in harmony with the purpose and intent of the Unified Development Code. That intent regarding nonconformities generally is very clear. It's the intent of the UDC to bring about the eventual elimination of nonconformities. Of course, this was also the case in 2014. The same language was in the code when the board made that decision to require this billboard remain in nonconforming status. So, again, it's the intent of the UDC to bring about the eventual elimination of this billboard. That being said, we do want to recognize several factors, and they're recognized in the staff report. One is that this billboard was legally digitized with this body's explicit permission. Additionally, we want to recognize the fact that the billboard is not under a traditional lease arrangement. It's under a recorded easement, which means that the property owner, in this case, is arguing they have no control over the billboard because it's in a recorded easement. And we also want to recognize that the cost to remove it is likely higher due to the digitization. On the other hand, however, we also want to recognize that The current property owner acquired this property after the easement was recorded. So there's an argument to be made that more due diligence should have been done to see what the local code allowed and did not allow with this billboard here. Secondly, billboards, digital billboards, unlike traditional, sort of physical billboards, they have a natural end of life. That term is about 8 to 10 years. And so there's an argument to be made when this body, required that this billboard remain non-conforming. That was a consideration taken into account. And it's, of course, been 10 years now since this billboard was allowed to be digitized. So taking all of this into consideration, we are recommending approval of the variance, which would allow the principal use to change without removing the billboard, subject to a sunset provision on the billboard, which is approximately 5 years. We've written it to be January 1, 2030. What are the benefits of this arrangement? First, it allows the restaurant to get open, which we find to be preferable to the smoke shop use, which is permitted there. It also allows them 5 years to raise the revenue necessary to justify buying out the billboard. It also allows them to come back and file a correspondence application, which we will bring to you for your consideration, to request additional time. It, gives notice to the billboard operator, not to make further investments into the billboard, that it's going to be required to come down. It also preserves the ability for us to encourage the removal of the billboard. So if we don't include some sort of sunset provision in this approval, then our only way to get this billboard down is to sit and wait for the next change in use and have the same argument again at that point in time. So we feel that it's important to preserve our ability to review this billboard regularly. And here are the language of the conditions. Here, of course, the important one being number 4, that this off-premise sign should be removed no later than January 1, 2030. And with that, I'm available for questions.
I got a quick question. So let's say we just in general about billboard question, I guess. Digitized billboard, and it's been 10 years since it started. They have to replace all the digitization. Would that not trigger something? Is that like when something grandfathered in is destroyed? Talk to me about that. If that wasn't much of a question, but I bet you have some thoughts.
It's my understanding that question isn't settled legally. That's my understanding.
Is settled?
Isn't.
Oh, isn't settled. Okay. Whether or not that redoing the digitization is enough to trigger, hey, you've lost your grandfather status is not okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay. That's a good answer. Any other questions of staff?
This is for discussion. My question really was, what was our reasoning in 2014 that
I'll tell you what I think it was. Was that we had a billboard anyway, and the digital billboard wasn't any. I think that probably 10, 12 years ago, the idea was more like, well, we're already kind of stuck with it. You might as well have it look a little better. And now the idea is like, we just want them gone at all costs.
Gotcha.
There's been like a change in dealing with billboards probably since 2014, that I've seen at least. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Whitehead, 275 Jefferson.
You're good.
Okay. From my lip, I was going to begin with what I recall as the intent of that, what was a boilerplate condition on any time we had a site with a billboard. We added a provision when I was at OPD that stated, and it was OPD at the time, for the record, not DPD, that The sign shall remain non-conforming. The purpose of that was so it couldn't change in technology, it couldn't get taller, it couldn't get bigger, it couldn't expand in any way, because as a non-conformity, it would be fixed in dimensions. The intent, particularly with this site, was not to freeze the building beneath it as a dry cleaners forever. And that indeed, I believe, was the interpretation of DPD in 2013, when it reviewed and then presented to you the smoke shop application, in which there were no reference to the billboard, much less a condition that it be taken down. And let me take a brief moment to discuss the history of this. My client, Jeff Dawson, who's not only the property owner, but a partner in the business, Petals of a Peony, that is also going to be the tenant here, he does not have any privity with Mr. David Buring, who was the owner at the time in 2014 of the billboard and the land. He sold it to the smoke shop. The smoke shop, in turn, sold it to Mr. Dawson, who's with me today. When he sold it, as Mr. Wardrop mentioned, after he sold it, he agreed with the owner at the time an easement, a perpetual easement, versus a lease that would have flowed to Mr. Dawson, and he could terminate it through some sort of negotiation. But since it's a separate easement, there's no way for us to negotiate its removal. It's a unilateral negotiation. Mr. Buring has all the cards. Mr. Buring and Mr. Dawson spoke this morning, and Mr. Buring, I think for the second or third time, expressed his unwillingness to discuss terminating that easement, the effect of which would be to totally destroy the value of my client's property. Because under the strict interpretation of condition number 4, if we can't settle with Mr. Buring, we have to tear down our building, and a billboard will lie on the site, and only a billboard. That's a very likely and worst scenario. A better scenario, which is still pretty bad and presents Fifth Amendment questions, is, well, what if we could negotiate a price? If I was with Mr. Buring, I would start with roughly $500,000, the cost of the digitization. I would add to it 20 or 30 years times 100,000. That's what we believe from our discussions with various billboard owners is the annual rent from that board. So we're talking $1.5 million to purchase that billboard. The property was purchased by my client for $250,000. We would say that a $1.5 million condition or exaction is not roughly proportional to what we're requesting. Condition number 4 would also require this body to reverse its findings back in 2014 that basically found this site eligible for a digital billboard. I think that presents some maybe due process questions. We would have to compel Mr. Buring to attend that meeting if we were going to reverse our findings from 2014. And that would be a pretty extraordinary clawback, in my knowledge, that this body has never attempted to do. And before I hand the floor over to Mr. Dawson, and I have a few visuals to show up on the screen, I want to point out that Mr. Harkavy, who just passed away, the late, great Mr. Harkavy, who testified before this board, I think he was right. He was right when he testified that the digital billboard would be produce less light pollution than a flood-lit billboard that was there before. And that was largely the basis of the approval. And I think if you drive down that block of Poplar, either during the daytime or the nighttime, you'll find that it is indeed one of the better-looking billboards. That notwithstanding, I realize it may have been the first and last billboard digitization in Memphis and Shelby County. One last point before I hand it over to Mr. Dawson. I will point out that there was a pole sign located on this site. That pole sign has been removed, so I don't know if we can do much about the billboard, but a sign has been removed. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dawson to give you a little history of how he found himself in this position, and maybe his conversation with Mr. Buring earlier.
All right, if you'll give your name and address for the record, I do need to swear you in.
Sure. My name is Jeff Dawson. My address is of my home or of the
home or business.
Business.
It's just for the record.
Yeah, 5167 Poplar, which is this
Okay.
location.
Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead and share it with us.
Okay, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the work you all do on a day-to-day basis. I find myself in a little bit of a predicament. My day-to-day job is to find great local talent, businesses. That's what I do, a lot of leasing in and around Memphis. We focus on local businesses, local restaurants. We do get regional, national, but for the most part, kind of our niche is supporting local businesses. I teamed up with Petals of a Peony, and we came up with a quick serve restaurant concept that we thought would fit well for East Memphis, and we had to find a location for that. This building was put up for sale. We thought, okay, this is a perfect location. This can kind of be the origination of this quick service restaurant that we have of aspirations of really growing, right? But the origination of this concept, this quick service restaurant, would be Memphis. And the goal is to grow and kind of be more of an upscale Panda Express. That's why we like the signage here. We thought the footprint was good. The building was originally built, it's only 1,100 square foot. It's got the easement in the back with the train tracks, and it's always been a drive-through. And just recently, like 2 years ago, CMU1 allows a restaurant now, but not a restaurant with a drive-through. So that was recent. When I purchased it, you look around, you've got Dunkin's, you've got Corky's, all in the same area that have this drive-through. So I guess all we're asking is, this is my neighborhood. This business has built up a lot of great rapport with the community. They offer really great product. And that's really what we try to do. We try to find great concepts in our neighborhood and put them in great places with co-tenancy. And that's the only point of this. I think we're kind of caught in the middle with a billboard that's a completely separate owner that was, the easement was created 2 ownerships ago. And all we're trying to do is put in a quick service restaurant that really, that building, its only real use to create the type of gross sales to afford a location like this would be a drive-through use. I think that's really all I have to report. I'm happy to do, we're already putting a couple $100,000 into the build out of a kitchen. Happy to do some flowers and paint the building, work on the canopies. Gonna redo the asphalt so it looks presentable in the neighborhood. But there's nothing that I can do as far as the digitized billboard that's owned by a separate owner. There's no relationship there. We just really want to make the best use for this site and the community. And I think the community's embraced this type of use. And it's really the only use that this location supports is a drive-through. Thanks so much for your time.
Are there any questions for Mr. Dawson? Any questions let me ask real quick, because they both said, I don't see anybody here that's in opposition to this, but just want to make sure. Okay. With that, I think what we need, or does anybody have any, I think we might have some, as we discussed, we may have some questions for the applicant. So does anybody, I don't want to miss, I don't know if we should go to discussion yet, but we're probably going to have to still ask them questions.
I guess I'm still, my question, I guess, would be, if we have 2 different owners at this point, I guess I'm still having an issue with the easement.
So I looked at it yesterday.
Okay.
So, and Mr. Whitehead, you did say, like, there's no relation between the guy that has the easement now, like it was all arm's length transaction. He sold it to somebody who then sold it in 21, which is when the easement came up. And then Mr. Dawson and his group bought it in 24, correct? But there was nobody
Privity.
was related. It was all arm's length.
Yes, sir. And I have a hard copy if
Okay.
you'd like to see a copy. But the seller to Mr. Dawson was the smoke shop owner who purchased the property from Mr. Buring.
So when Smoke Shop bought it in 2021, they immediately gave a perpetual easement to that seller. And it's not a lease. They don't pay rent. They just own it. And now he sold the property to current owner who has an easement. And there's no, he doesn't, like, you're saying, like, you might could come up with a price that the guy's willing to take, but that would be nothing but for his pocket and his heart to do that, because has no motivation whatsoever to take anything but rent from people, because he's got this right.
That's right.
So the existing current owner has no control at all over
It was a perpetual easement that was granted prior to his ownership. You could argue they should have figured that out before they bought it, or stuff like, those type things. But
Okay. Now the question is.
no matter who bought it, you're stuck with that.
Who's responsible for upkeep and maintenance of the billboard and its digital
Probably the billboard company.
Yeah, I'm looking, it should be in this easement, but. I
Yeah, if
would
it's
imagine-
leased through Mr. Buring, the original owner, then it's a long-term lease and the billboard upkeeps it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he has the right to it, he leases to to Lamar or whoever.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
So he has a separate contract that he has to deal with outside of our actual building, this particular business. So he can do whatever he wants to that.
Yeah, the billboard owner has nothing to do with anything but the billboard.
Question, does the billboard owner still have to sunset in 2030, according to the,
Conditions,
the
How
conditions?
would we link him in if he's not?
that was,
No, ma'am, there was no sunset, and since there was no sunset on the approval, the owner, Mr. Buring, went whole hog on its improvement. I would assume that if there was a 10-year sunset, he would have calculated that into the level of improvement he'd made to the billboard, but he was given, a perpetual approval for all intents and purposes by the body, and so he maximized that
So
approval.
we would contend it wasn't perpetual because that did still have the condition of the nonconformity. But additionally, our attorneys would like a 1-month hold to review these documents for accuracy,
okay.
if the board would so oblige them.
Mr. Chairman, I shared this easement with staff, I think, 10 days ago, but we would prefer, at the worst-case scenario, this whole situation has taken my client aback. He needs to get his building permits greenlit, and this is what's holding it back. So if there's an issue with this, we'll just keep condition number 4, and Mr. Dawson will have to pay me or someone better to make a better argument between now and 2030. But he really needs, within 30 days, those building permits released.
And I'm assuming the approval of this will hold up that. So we can't approve one issue without.
Right, it
approving the other.
wouldn't do any good, yeah. Okay.
I would say, just to reiterate a couple of things that Mr. Pinson said, we do disagree that this was a perpetual approval in 2014 with the first condition that it remained non-conforming. The amount of money that was put into it in 2014, at some point, there's a diminishing return on that, so it'd be interesting to know what that is. So there are those factors that we see as a difference with the applicant. And also with the billboard, there is a separate owner with an easement. However, if the billboard was to be deemed illegal, that's something that the owner of the billboard would have to deal with and not the owner of this property. So I think that if we do move forward, our attorneys can definitely speak with the applicant after the meeting to see if there's anything we could do if this were to be approved as conditioned.
Okay.
And hopefully one final point, Mr. Chairman, and I think this goes to a question you asked. The UDC in the nonconformities clause has a section on nonconforming uses such as this billboard. Ordinary repair and maintenance is permitted to a nonconformity. So yes, there was a lot of money spent in 2014, but the idea was that ordinary repair and maintenance of the bulbs and the other infrastructure would be permitted, just not a change in technology.
Sure. Yeah. Tornado hits it tomorrow, he's out of luck. Total destruction, right? I mean, that's, yeah.
Of more than
Yeah.
75% of its value.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's discuss. So if we could get a motion to approve BOA 2024-123 as conditioned by staff.
Approve.
Second,
Okay, any thoughts?
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
So if we approve it as conditioned, does the billboard after 2030 become illegal use? Is that what let me pull up.
Currently, yes, but as we did mention, so right, we're okay with y'all approving it, and our attorneys will also talk to them about if there are any issues, and then we can always bring this back before you.
Yeah, what Mr. Waldrop
But
was
allow them to
saying,
get their permits today that
they get their permits and, there's another opportunity in 5 years too to look at it, even if nothing happens in between, where they come back and, we've had people possibly before say, we've tried. This is how much they wanted to do this. What do you, but it's like, it requires them to come back to us. So it's not just perpetual.
Gotcha.
So it's not it is you have to remove it, but they can always come back to us to say we can't.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think what Mr. Whitehead would like, just not to have that at all, but he did offer to let us keep it, so.
But by keeping number 4 in there, does it by default in 2030 go to the billboard owner and not the?
Well, it would now be the condition of this variance is violated, so the variance would fail.
So we're obligating the applicant to do something that
They have no control.
they have no control over. Again, I get your attorney's going to talk to Mr. Whitehead or whoever else is representing the applicant, but he doesn't have any control over it.
We all have control. It might be expensive, but they can buy that billboard.
Well, and again,
I think that's just my personal opinion. I don't think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the right move of obligating somebody that spent $200,000 on a building to pay $1.5 to $2 million to, you're painting them into a corner.
well, and again, one thing to consider, if the billboard is eventually deemed illegal, the owner of the billboard would have to deal with those consequences and citations. So, there are other factors that would not necessarily tie this to the current, it still would be tied to the current owner of the property, but there is an owner of the billboard that what we're saying in 2030 becomes illegal if there's no other action. And they would have to deal with those issues.
Yeah, I'd prefer that the owner of the billboard be the one that's penalized instead of, I'm tired of looking at a building that says smokes on it that you can see all the way up and down, Poplar Avenue. That's just my opinion.
Well, keep in mind that the variance was in place before the current owner bought the property. And the easement was in place before the current owner bought the property. So, you could argue that they knew about this situation before they bought it, and arguably that was factored into the price that they paid. I don't know that it was, but it could have been and should have been factored into the price they paid for it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
It just seems to me like we're kind of penalizing the applicant for the billboard when there seems to be a clear difference between the billboard and this property that sits just beside it. Is there a way, and I guess this is a question for OPD and our legal counsel, is there a way to separate the two? As we talk about the infractions of this billboard, is there room for a violation of the billboard being expanded, being a non-conforming use? And I don't say that to stir up more mud, but my point is, I think that as we discuss these two different these two different land uses, it seems like we're kind of being heavy on the applicant when the person that's kind of caused the upheaval here is the billboard, and he's not here.
Not here.
So that isn't a
Well, that
solution.
is true. I think it's similar to what Mr. Bruce said. I mean, every billboard that we have is, most of them are on someone else's property,
Right.
you know? And that's what's creating the problem, because you can only have one principal use, either the billboard or the other use.
Right, but this one is special because it was expanded even though it was legal non-conforming. Am I right?
Well, it was, the technology was changed, even though it was legal
Yeah.
non-conforming. But then a condition was also added that it remains legal non-conforming.
Okay. Well, I'll close with that, but what I'd like is to kind of explore a way to separate the two. This is going to be a significant investment and already has been a significant investment by the applicant. And even looking at the billboard owner, if this is going to have to come down in 5 years, as y'all know, we're a complaint-based, or OPD or DPD or LUDS is a complaint-based organization or codes. Is anything going to happen with that stipulation?
Well, complaint-based, other than when you make a condition.
Okay.
Which I track them all, and then I follow up.
You put that on your calendar and go
Yes.
back and look.
I have a list of all your time-based conditions that I follow up on.
All right. I'll close, but it just, as we talk about this, it seems like the main issue is the billboard, and the owner of the billboard isn't here. Thanks.
So I got a follow-up question. Worst case scenario, January 1st, 2030, the billboard is still up. Now it's a non-conformance to the variance, right? What's the worst thing that happens, except they come back here and they have to make the case of why it's non-conforming? At that point, does the billboard have to come down?
I mean, the worst case would be whatever y'all decide in 2030 if they came back here. If y'all rejected them, I guess that would be the worst case.
But I guess the whole point I'm making is they'll just have to come back and remake the case for while it's non-conforming at that point.
Right, currently that is an option that they would have. They could file a correspondence case at that time.
And then we just have to hear it again and then.
Decide from the owner at this point.
At that point, it would be, yeah.
The owner's gonna be penalizing.
But we'll just be hearing the case probably from the current user of the restaurant because that's who's asking for the variance.
Yeah, they own the underlying fee of the property. It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
It is.
If we heard the case again in 30, we just at that point, 5 more years. Yeah.
If that's what that board or whoever's on
I
it.
just don't imagine in 5 years, there's a good chance that board technology will be completely.
We'll have floating boards.
Yeah, so it sounds like in 2029, they could just come back and make the case again, just make the request again, and maybe they'll have reason for us to extend it, for this board to extend it beyond that. Maybe they won't, but they'll have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of yeah, exactly.
But if we don't do anything, I think the objective is to eventually get the sign down. And so this just, if we keep this condition in, then it again, makes them have to come back and justify a further extension of the time the billboard is up. And they can't justify that we can get it down then. If they can't justify it, fine, it'll stay up longer.
I agree.
Okay, any other thoughts before we vote? So,
I may have missed who made the motion.
what now,
who made the motion?
I did.
yeah, you made the motion.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, if you could give us a roll call vote, please, Mr. Penzis.
Mr. Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Ms. Scurlock,
Yes.
Mr. Love, Ms. Conrad,
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Selden.
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the property